Hello, everyone. I'm so glad everyone's here today. Just as a small reminder, the featured meal will be available all week long at Bevier Cafe. So if you didn't have time to get it before the talk, there is still time to go and get a featured meal. I had it on Monday and it was fantastically delicious. They did a really nice job. So many kinds of tomato and corn in multiple ways. Very delicious. So I think I'll start with our introduction and we'll keep letting people in as we get a few more people moving towards the talk. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for part 3 of the Lunchbox series. We wanted to start by giving you a little background of the Lunchbox project. The Lunchbox was conceived by members of the IGB community and is an event series centered on food that consists of monthly seminars from U of I faculty, staff, community members that are paired with special meals prepared by Bevier Cafe chefs. Since the IGB sits at the intersection of science and society, we sought to highlight the scientific connections within food's sentimental value while exploring how food influences our individual experiences. The Lunchbox seeks to create an inclusive community that encompasses people from different cultural backgrounds, and the Lunchbox is sponsored by the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And not only can you get the meal for the rest of the week, but if you're off campus or you're busy or something happened in your life, you can also just use the meal ticket another time to pick up a delicious lunch from Bevier. And at the conclusion of the seminar, we'll send a link with a short survey, which will be posted in the chat. Your responses will help us keeping improving the experience. And as a bonus, you will automatically get entered into a raffle for a chance to win some delicious snacks to eat. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Esther Ngumbi, who is an author, researcher, educator, mentor, speaker, and champion for change around the issues of hunger, gender, education, youth activism, agriculture, sustainability, and public service. She works as an assistant professor in the Entomology and African American departments at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She is the founder of organizations that empower farmers and youth in Kenya, and she served as a mentor for entities like the Clinton Global University Initiative and President Obama's Young Leadership Program. Dr. Ngumbi believes that everyone has a right to live a dignified life. She vows always to use her education as a voice for the voiceless and use her intellect to serve the need for the hungry, the poor, the needy. She has a huge heart, an unstoppable passion, and a deep commitment for developing Kenya, Africa, and our global world. Thank you so very much for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Julia, and I want to thank IGB and all the people that conceived this amazing lunch series. I have enjoyed the food, the conversation, and I look forward to just talking with all of you and to sharing my world of plants, tomatoes, and corn. So when I was asked to choose the plant, the food, I was like, immediately, I didn't even have a moment to think. I was corn and tomato, and I look forward to just sharing why. And so I will share my PowerPoint and
a little bit more detail about this.
So can everyone hear me? Okay, so as you can see, I love colors, first of all. And so then when I was asked to select the food, of course, corn, because corn has all the vibrant colors from all along through the breeding and domestication history of maize. We've gone through just little tiny teocentas to the big kennels that we have today. And so maize has gone through this amazing, tremendous journey. And so are tomatoes. I think we're just coming off from summertime. I hope you enjoy tomatoes. I know for one I did, the heirlooms, the hybrids, a lot of varieties. And I don't know about you, but I always tend to appreciate the fragrance, the smell. I think we eat, and I think in the previous series I've already shared about how we eat, not only with just the food, but the scent and the smell and everything. And for me, actually, the smell is, I'm a chemical ecologist, and so I study actually chemistry and the fragrances that are produced by plants. And so I hope you will enjoy this talk today. It's just a brief window into my world of plants. And so, yes, as you may probably guess, I have an accent. I come and I was originally raised in Kenya, the Kenyan coast. And so corn, when I was growing up, corn was just a staple food. And it was prepared in so many, many different ways. From porridge that I grew up drinking in the mornings until when I grew up, I was like, okay, enough of it. To be honest, after my childhood, I was done with porridge. That's it. I think my mother prepared enough of it. To ugali. Ugali is a staple. It still is a favorite. And it's almost like grit, but we let it a little bit become hard. And it's just amazing when you eat it. And with ugali, you can eat it with stew, with kale, collard greens, cabbage. And then kachumbari is a favorite dish as well, which we call it salsa. So, the corn and tomato to me growing up was present in many, many forms. And I remember just coming off from school and just having the smell just lead me, the fragrance. What was my mother cooking? What form of corn was being made that day? Very or ugali or yes. And I enjoy eating the multiple forms of food that corn and tomatoes make. And of course, then I grew also as a researcher today. As of today, I work in my lab. We focus on actually tomato and corn, and you can see. So I still that relationship with tomato and corn runs deep, and I treasure that. You can see my pictures sometimes tell my mood and my appreciation for what I do. And so, yes, and this is just a picture that was taken in Kenya when I visited my family. And so, yeah, as a child, we grew corn, we ate corn, and in multiple forms. But at the same time, even though food was such a way, an elegant way of appreciating corn, I still remember many, many years we would do our best because we would grow it. And halfway through the season, insects would come and munch on a lot of our crops. And when they did that, it meant that we would lack either lunch or dinner. And I realized that it wasn't only in our farm, the community, different community members, as I walked to school, walking through different farmers' fields, I noticed that a lot of the crop was being eaten by these hungry caterpillars. And I wanted to do something because I didn't want them to take our food away. I wanted to find ways to find solutions. And sometimes if it was not the caterpillars, drought would come and I would just watch our blooming maize slowly wither to die. And so while on one hand, I appreciated the varieties of food that we were growing and corn, on the other hand, I had so many lingering questions about insects that were taking away our food. And importantly, early on as a child, I wanted to pursue a career that eventually would allow me to understand, first of all, how in the world do these insects find our plants? How? How do they zoom in on our maize and our corn that we had put all our efforts in? And I wondered at the same time, are there better varieties of corn or tomato that we could plant that could withstand the pest pressures that the traditional varieties we were planting? Was there something better out there? At the same time, most of the time we would use pesticides to address the pest challenges. But I would also watch the harmful effects of, sometimes my parents would get sick. And so I wondered, are there other better options to control these insects? So that relationship and interactions and the early experiences really would set me on a path, on a career path. And up to today, I'm still working with insects. I'm still understanding. I haven't been able to find all the answers, but day in, day out, I am finding these answers. And I wondered at the same time, how do plants defend themselves? Because we know, unlike you and me, when challenges come, if there's a fire, if you have an enemy, yes, we all have, we know we'll run away from the threat. But plants are stationary, they cannot run away. So they have to have innate ways to deal with pest pressures. So our first question was, how do plants defend themselves? And so if you've never wondered how plants, so I look forward to just sharing a little bit about plants, how they defend themselves, because they do. And I've already shared that, yeah, you and I can run away, but plants, my beautiful friends, plants, corn, tomato, soybean, all the plants, I hope you have a favorite plant, they can't go away. And yet we know that day in, day out, they're consistently being faced by multiple stress factors, from the insects to drought to extreme heat. But yes, indeed, a lot of research that has gone into understanding plants. Now we know that, yes, plants do have several layers of defenses, both direct and indirect. And so sometimes probably you've gone to touch a plant and you've been pricked by a thorn, for example. Or yes, so plants do have a lot of layers of defense, beginning with direct, what we call direct defenses. And these come in the form of trichomes, thorns, waxy layer. And some of these direct defenses, I remember working a year ago, I was working with different maize varieties, and some of them were the older varieties, and I had an itchy effect actually, because some of these, these defenses are indeed, they do drive plant enemies away, including human beings. I remember having the corn touch my skin, and I had actually to stop working and to go to CVS because I couldn't. It was just way too much. So yes, plants traditionally have all this set of direct defenses, and they're continuously improving on them because we've figured out these defenses, and it's a continuous evolution by the plants to ensure that they are able to survive, just like you and I. And they also layer on. So if the thorns do not deter an insect, if the trichomes do not deter an insect, and the insect is like persistent, as we all are, so insects, first of all, are very persistent, then we already now know that they layer on top of the direct defenses, we have indirect plant defenses, and that's where chemistry comes in. They produce volatile organic compounds. You can call them fragrances, you can call them scents, you can, but yes, we know that our plants do release volatiles when they are threatened. And when they are threatened by many things, including insects, when they get sick, because we know plants also get sick, viruses, bacterial diseases. When they get sick, they also produce some of these volatiles. And so because they play important roles. And so as I shared, there are many triggering factors to volatile emissions in plants. But we now know that because, as I say, the plants don't move, so volatiles are also a form of communication. And as a result, through the volatiles, these are almost, you can think of them as messages. We know that these messages too are very species specific, and they're very revealing, first and foremost, because different plants have their unique scent or unique blend of volatiles. For example, using plant chemistry, we can differentiate between the different plants. Tomato, for example, I think if you smell the tomato, you smell there's a compound, particular compound, beta-philanthrin, you know, that's the compound. When you smell corn, it has its own unique fragrance. And so there's a variety of different fragrances. But we also know that this released signals of volatiles can also be very revealing about the type of insects that is munching on the plant. And we can also tell via the blend, even the species. We can differentiate, yes, aphids from caterpillars, and even within the caterpillar species, we can know whether it's an armyworm that's eating the tomato. Is it the fall armyworm that's eating my corn plant? Is it the flea beetle that's eating? So we can use plant chemistry to really figure out who is devouring our plants. At the same time, also plants, when they are continuously facing threats such as drought, lack of water, we know that they produce a characteristic scent that can be revealing and be almost saying, I need water. So I always say plants are talking. Every time I'm in the greenhouse, I stop for a moment because I'm like listening to what the plants are telling me. So yes, there's a lot. Chemistry and the volatiles, scents and fragrances can be quite revealing. But we also know that apart from being revealing, they play multiple roles. For example, we now know that as soon as an insect starts to feed on a plant, the plant can start warning its siblings and other relatives, like, hey, please start over expressing your defenses, because you know what, the caterpillars are here, they're starting to so they can start to share. They send these messages that, hey, get ready, somebody, the enemy is here. But at the same time, we know that they can also recruit natural enemies. So they can be like the 911 calls. I always say, think of them as the 911 calls. They're, hello, natural enemy, can you come here? Somebody is trying to get me. So there's a lot of just communication that is going on when these fragrant and volatiles, scents, are triggered. And as I've already shared, so we know that different stressors, different insects, different, they all can, they all elicit or induce a very specific plant chemistry blend, which now we use to really know what's going on. And we now know that to date, over 1,700 unique different volatile compounds have already been identified. So it's a very, very dynamic field, and we're continuing to identify more. And we know we can categorize all these compounds into different categories based on, for example, we have the green leaf volatiles. And if you've ever, we call them the freshly cut grass smell. And if you've ever walked in when field has been recently mowed, you'll be like, you smell all those volatiles. Those are green leaf volatiles. But we also have monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes. So there are many different categories of volatile compounds today. And so because we know that these compounds are not only just being produced by plants, they're serving different reasons. We do, my field, we characterize these blends. And so we look at both the entire blend, but also we look at individual compounds. We look at categories because we know all these different interactions that are going on, all these applications that the plants are using chemistry for sometimes requires just a unique relative abundance or unique blend or just an individual compound. So we do thoroughly look at different all the different constituents of the blends that are being produced. So now we talked about this chemistry, but how does this communication even begin? We know that, yes, as soon there's elicitors in the caterpillar's saliva or the spit. If you ever have held a caterpillar, they'll spit at you, I would say. And if you haven't, hopefully one time, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about spit when you're having your lunch, that's what they do. And that's what starts all this amazing communication system in the plants. And so as soon as the caterpillar munches on, the saliva has these elicitors or hormones, kind of immediately triggers the plant into really upregulating all the defenses, including just at the site of injury. We know at that point, this localized defense that happens, and then throughout systematically, all the different parts of the plant become very, they have become aware, almost like aware. So they send in all the compounds to, first of all, make the plant very distasteful to the caterpillar. And then, so there are many other defenses that the plant uses as soon as it senses the caterpillar feeding. And as I've shared, because now the plants start to speak, it's like, okay, it's sending the defense to ensure that the caterpillar either stops feeding or moves away. But in case we know that insects are so persistent, they will stay away, they'll keep munching. But we know that some of these compounds further now start calling, the 911 calls start bringing in this help that the plant needs via the natural enemies of these insects. So as I've shared before, I think of plant chemistry as these 911 calls, volatiles that are being sent day in, day out by plants. And yes, we know that these natural enemies are tuned in. As soon as they receive that 911 call, they quickly they come to help. And you can see this is, for example, a parasitized hornworm, and it's it's on its way to not feeding on the plant. So yes, there is help through natural enemies. So that's one of the roles that plant volatiles do. But at the same time, we know the same time as the plant is being chewed upon, it's also recruiting soil microbes. The mycorrhizae fungi, for example. The other soil microbes that include the bacillus and plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. So the plant above ground, it's crying for help. Below ground, it's also crying for help. And before you know it, all this help from all the levels, below ground, above ground, really is helpful and allows the plant at least to defend itself. So yes, as I've said, plant defenses do indeed allow plants to grow, to survive, and ultimately produce the food crop so that all of us enjoy the food. All of us, whether we live in developed countries or developing countries, have access to the food. And thanks to advances in science, including plant science, as well as entomological science, we are continuously improving these plant varieties. But at the same time, we know that there's so much that you can do. So as we alter many of these traits to continuously allow plants to grow and grow better, we know that most of the time the breeders are not thinking about plant chemistry. I'm saddened. Most importantly, they're thinking about we, the consumers, who continuously are wanting bigger fruits. For example, we are wanting our corn to always produce more bushels, and we're never thinking about plant chemistry. So all this good plant breeding effect and efforts sometimes come at a price. We know that they may be coming at a price, altering those natural defenses that plants have evolved over millions of years to allow them to survive. And yes, we know that there's a lot of good literature that's in pursuit of better crop varieties. We've altered plant genetics. And it's possible that we've also altered plant chemistry, which is so important. As I shared, plants, that's their number one way of communicating. And so it's important to stop for a moment and think, then when we do all these alterations, what about plant defenses? And when we alter, when we take away the ability of plants to defend themselves, because there will be so many negatives, then that leaves the farmers with the need of putting more fertilizers, more pesticides, because guess what? Then plants no longer are able to fight by themselves, and so yet we still over and over face the challenges of insects. So it's breeding and the pursuit of all these better varieties comes at an expense. And we know that, yes, most of the plant breeding efforts only address plant defense if the pest is threatening resistance to insects. Only sometimes, for example, with the fall armyworm, for example, most recently, we know fall armyworm has been a big challenge, pest challenge that has threatened the ability of farmers especially farmers around the world in the African continent where I come from, the ability to grow crops. And so sometimes we have cases where plant breeders do intend really think of plant resistance, but often at times they don't. And so I'll share some of the research that we are doing in this area, and this is a project in collaboration with Dr. Angela Kent at NRS, and Sierra Raglin is a PhD student who is doing most of the experiments here. And we are actually interested in understanding how crop breeding impacts plant defenses through alterations of the plant chemistry. Remember, I talked about how plant chemistry is so important in the interactions of plants, insects, beneficial soil microbes. And so we want to understand if crop breeding impacts these interactions and how. And we know that this is just a very dynamic field because every year farmers are getting newer varieties every year. So it's almost like a chase game. Every year we know there are newer varieties. And what we know today may be very irrelevant tomorrow because, as I said, we don't know what's going on with breeding versus defense. And it's just fascinating for me, and because I would really be sad when plants lose that ability, innate ability. And so to do this, because we are looking at the impact of different plant varieties, we start with 6 genotypes, which were chosen to reflect different breeding eras, running all the way from the 1950s to 1980, and we'll continue. So this is a continuing project. So we have recent experiments that we actually used 2019 varieties that are planted in our state. And so for this also, as I said, we also wanted to understand if also the interactions below ground are being altered. So what's going on above ground, what's going below ground. And we used microbes that we have in our lab. This is a bacillus, and this is a part of newer tools that farmers are using to promote crop growth while maintaining a healthy environment. So the goal here is to truly find solutions to agriculture that are environmental friendly, that use less resources, and that actually work with the nature rather than against nature. And then 4 weeks later, we collected the plant chemistry to investigate what is going on. And we also did sequencing of the microbes in the soil to further see the microbes, how they interact with the native microbes that are resident in soil. So indeed, we found out, so this is just MDS representation of the different genotypes. So we, at 4 weeks, we collected the volatiles, and then we analyzed them and see if we can see a variety effect in impacting plant chemistry. And indeed, it was very clear that yes, as we alter the plant genetics, as different varieties definitely produce, of course, it's the same volatiles. We didn't see a lot of changes in the different compounds, but the entire blend was different. Even though there's one of the varieties that we noted a few of the compounds that are so important, especially for recruiting the natural enemies who are missing. And that for us is almost like a point of alarm, because we we want to make sure that we are not breeding and taking away, especially these compounds that are already known to recruit natural enemies. We want to ensure that maize can can be able to recruit these helpers. We also saw differences in, and this is a very busy chart, so excuse a busy chart, but the take home here is that we see differences, first of all, in the growth, and we know that the microbe is working, it's promoting growth, but it's also promoting growth in a plant variety dependent way. And so we see differences in the different genotypes. And we also see that we only got a bigger improvement in plant growth only in the treatments that had sterilized soil. So it's clear that when we introduce the microbes, they are facing a lot of resistance from the native microbe community. And so we must find ways to ensure that then these solutions that we are using really work in harmony with the resident community. So the take home in this chart is, yes, microbe treatment improves growth and improves growth, but in a genotype dependent way. We see the effect of the microbiome, but we also see it only when we use sterilized soil. And so there's a lot of things going on. We are later on going back to look at what are some of the mechanisms. And when we look at the total chemistry, again, we see a very, very strong genotype effect. So we know that, yes, as we breed for newer genotypes, we're changing the chemistry. And what does this mean to the insects? This is going to perform newer studies with behavior, and we have the tools to let the insects tell us whether it likes the fragrance, it doesn't like it, whether it's, and what does that mean? And so in just a brief summary, that indeed breeding impacts plant chemistry, and it's almost a strong driver of plant chemistry compared to microbiome treatment. And so what this result means eventually to the insect community, we are going to investigate that. So what about tomatoes? So I can't leave tomatoes behind. Do we also see a similar trend in that different varieties produce different blends, and consequently, then we hypothesize that that will will impact plant defenses as well as recruitment of natural enemies. And so for this, actually, we actually did a survey with the farmers here in the state of Illinois. We asked the farmers, what are your favorite varieties? What do you grow? And they gave us their top list, and these are some of the ones that we were able to pick from the farmers list, thanks to Erin Daddy, who is my undergraduate student, and you can see her appreciation for tomatoes. So Tomato Lab runs deep in my lab members, and we appreciate them. And she was a chef too, so Erin, hopefully one day you'll make tomato dishes for us. So we also used soil from Champaign County, and again, for varieties representing heirloom and hybrids. And then our insect was the hornworm, and again, collected plant chemistry and looked at the blend. And we also wanted to also, like the other previous study, look at how different varieties interact now with the mycorrhizae fungi, which are other microbes that are very present in many ecosystems. In fact, 85% of terrestrial plants are colonized by mycorrhizae fungi. And we wanted to see how these benefits that are these relationships with the fungi that have evolved for millions of years are being impacted by breeding. So the approach again, we grow the tomatoes from seeds, and then during transplanting, we split them into two. One set gets inoculated with the fungi, and then on the other set doesn't get inoculated, and then we grow them under greenhouse conditions. And later on, we introduce the villain here of our story, the insect, the hornworm, and collect the chemistry because after the plants have been induced, and see what's going on. And before, we also look at other important traits, which include biomass differences, because of course, again, we live in a society where all of us want plants to grow bigger, and because in the end, also bigger plants will translate into bigger fruit sizes, and so we wanted to see how the different varieties are being impacted by inoculation with fungi. And first and foremost, yes, the fungi we saw the benefits of the fungi in that it improved plant growth. But at the same time, we saw differences that were very variety dependent. So there is clearly a variety effect. The most growth we saw with the heirloom Cherokee purple, and so we are continuing this study. So we see improvement in both above ground and below ground. And these charts also further show you that. And CP means Cherokee purple, no mycorrhizae fungi, which is AMF, and plus herbivore damage, and CP with mycorrhizae fungi. And then this is just looking at root growth. When we come to chemistry, again, we also saw the take-home message here is that we see again these differences in plant chemistry that are very variety dependent. Almost the same result that we saw with maize. Is a strong variety effect when it comes to plant chemistry. And so it really gets us to ask hopefully the next set of questions. What does this mean? And with the tomatoes too, we want to actually do another bigger study with many varieties, including some of the older varieties, and see through the history of breeding, what are we doing? What are we altering as it relates to plant defense? And then what then does that mean to plant defense? What does that mean to the ability of plants to recruit the natural enemies? And so I look forward to the work from our lab. And so indeed, I'm wrapping up here. It's a volatile world. Fragrances are everywhere. And hopefully, I know we're just coming off from summertime. If it was summertime, I would say, always appreciate the fragrances out there. But we know that apart from just being fragrance, they're playing important ecological roles, mediating a lot of interactions between plants, insects, natural enemies, below ground microbiomes, and signaling on so many levels. And we know that different insects do induce different blends. So basically, I can spend the entire life just identifying different chemistry, identifying fragrance, and understanding what does that mean to insects. But importantly, again, we know that food insecurity is a big challenge. I grew up seeing it is still going on. I work with farmer groups in Kenya, and the pest challenges are continuing they continued actually to increase in the intensities. And so plant chemistry will continue to be important because we can utilize it into creating all these help points for our crops so that they produce the food that is needed to nourish and sustain billions of people that sometimes often may not have the privilege to have such a beautiful lunch that was prepared today. And I hope as we eat and as we enjoy and this lecture has just allowed you to appreciate plant chemistry and realize that there's many roles that plant chemistry does, and will continue to showcase what's going on, especially how breeding impacts, and hopefully we'll continue to especially work with plant breeders to ensure that as we breed for newer varieties, we don't neglect those really important functions of plant chemistry that have been and have helped plants to survive in a world that is full of threats, including insects. So thank you for coming to my talk today. And I wanted to end early so that we can have a discussion or you can ask many questions. And so I'll stop sharing and I will get your questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's open the floor for questions. You can unmute yourself or you can put your question in the chat, or if you would like to privately message your question to me, that is also totally okay.
So I have a question, Esther. Well, I had actually many questions. There's so many. I didn't know so much about all those volatile compounds and so many things that I can see when you said the smell of the mown grass, that's something, the smell of the tomatoes. I grew up, my parents have like a small area garden. So I always grew up with, let's say, homegrown tomatoes, and they have such a strong smell. So when I moved out, living independently, and I went to a supermarket and I was like, what? These tomatoes don't smell as much, right? So yeah, so one thing is, I don't know if you can respond like what is the different like degrees of a smell. I don't know if it's the variety or if it's something related to the quality, because sometimes when I go to the farmer's market here, also like, oh, they also smell more like tomatoes. So that's one of my questions about the tomato part. And the other one is, so now that we're looking into the climate summit, there's so much attention about how it's going to work, that because that I guess also affects like the agriculture in the world. And so I don't know, is there any kind of regulation when breeding, looking at those compounds and other parts? So there's no regulation. So the only thing is just as you can start breeding, you have like more production or something that's enough, and they're not really looking at anything else like what you were talking about, like the pest or anything that can eventually damage the crops.
So yeah, thanks for two excellent actually noting of like many of us. Yeah, you go to farmers market and you can almost smell the real tomato, but then you get the hybrids that are in the store, and it's like night and day. And we know, yes, there was actually a very good science paper that came out that looked at almost 400 tomato varieties and looked at the genetic makeup, and to really explain why the heirlooms particularly still flavorful, still retain their smell. And we know that, yeah, it's breeding as a result of breeding, as you know, we continue to give residents these values that consumers want, that this uniformity, bigger tomato, then we lose, and you can only pack so much in the tomatoes in genetic wise. So we we take out some of those important genes and genetic component that really sustain flavors and smell. So that has been actually shown that, yeah, indeed, it's a result of breeding, and it's a balance. I think it's a balance, but yeah, I think it's important that regulation comes in. But more important, I think I'm so glad that at least farmers, and there's that movement into sustainable ways, and a lot of farmers now are actually wanting back that original test. And we also know that, yeah, also the practices too, a lot of these conventional also farming practices, we don't also value the soil, I think, and also the flavors too, so get also a lot of boost from also the soils, and how we are taking care of the soils with which these tomatoes are growing. So yeah, I think that regulation should begin, but yeah, of course, it's hard, because on one hand, a lot of consumers that just want, when they go to snacks or the market, to find a tomato, and then most of don't even want a damaged one. You want it as you don't even can't entertain a caterpillar to just have a speckle or to just share. We don't even want to share with caterpillars. We just want to have everything just as shiny and big, and so it comes at a price. And but I think farmers of today, we have a lot of just thinking about these other unsustainable ways, and the price we pay for just valuing some characteristics. But at the same time, we know that, yeah, as we do that, as we get all these important genetic makeups that also are important in defenses, and then we make the plants vulnerable today. And so as a result, we see a lot of pesticides, and insects become resistant at the same time, because then we leave such a narrow defense tools for the plant by itself, and then we have to help the plant, and then it's just a cycle that has to stop. So thanks for that question. And then there's a question here: important is really for exogenous enzyme activity with respect to insect attraction. So yeah, thanks, Michelle. We know that even beneath all these volatiles are the hormones, the jasmonic phytohormones, jasmonic acid, we have salicylic acid, and all these actually, these pathways are important in the production of these volatile compounds. And we know that, for example, the jasmonic acid pathway is triggered by caterpillar. So these are the leaf chewing insects. On the other hand, the piercing sucking insects like the aphids trigger salicylic acid. So yes, beneath just the overall, so plant chemistry is what we see, what we can just see and isolate, but beneath that there are pathways, there are hormone pathways, and they're also so important eventually when we have to come up with ways to allow plants to defend themselves better. And so yes, so when beneath the chemistry, the volatiles are pathways that are important. And so thanks for mentioning that, Michelle. And then there's a question, Kelsey, does this have implication for growing conditions in terms of location, greenhouse, screenhouse? Yes, indeed, we know that also location, and because location, greenhouse studies, you can barely pack so much soil in a pot, right? And so we know, and then most of the time, most of these greenhouse studies, they are using the spotting soil, and we know that soil also eventually impacts the flavor and whatnot. So there's differences in that can impact even plant defenses as well. Soil types, as I mentioned, soil type, temperature, and many even fertilizer too can impact the overall blend and quality of the signal, of the volatile signal, and consequently impact our plant and insect interaction. So there's a lot of just different factors that influence the plant chemistry blend. And when plants like tomatoes, basil, and homegrown have stronger fragrance, yes, that's very true. Does it mean they are healthy and more full of nutrients? So, and that is a good question. So until we do the tests to prove that, but I think there's body of evidence that shows that indeed, especially plants grown in soils, especially organic soils that are more healthier, yes, they have more nutrients actually. So there's that body of research, and that tests all the different nutrients from the flavonoids to all the important nutrients, and we know that yes, that is impacted by the soil type and how healthy the soil is. Okay, any questions? Those are very good questions. I really love amazing questions that all of you are asking.
So Esther, do you think that we have like a society, because we have somehow we have reached like a non-return point in terms of agriculture, like the varieties, the phenotypes that we got? Is there any, do you see that there is no return point, that we can just, there's something that we lost in the plants, for instance, in the kind of the resistance to any type of plagues, that it's very difficult now to recover from what it was?
I think we now know, yes, we've lost a lot, but the good thing is, like, I think there's a good body of scientists that is now looking back into the wild relatives of our plants and really using them as a source of this wealth of genetics, wealth of many things that we actually have lost. So yes, there's a lot of this good science that's happening at the moment, looking at all these wild varieties, because they've grown, for example, maize, going back to its origins, and looking at just all the genetic makeup, as well as all the different strategies that these plants at their original environment utilize, and then starting to repack back that into our new varieties. So yes, yeah, we've realized that there's so much, we can only just go that far. We have now to come back and really continue to dig, to look at all these older varieties. And my lab is working in collaboration with Angela Kent. From the experiment that I showed, we then had another one that looked at 24 different genotypes, and we picked them from the different major history of breeding, and looking at how these varieties, and they're different. You can, even some experiments that I've done, you see the older varieties can have these very strong layers of defense. When you look at their trichomes, for example, it makes it difficult for the caterpillars to even eat. So they are very well defended, and their chemistry is a little bit stronger. And so we are getting back and looking at this, what we've lost, and how we can start putting it back. And thanks to CRISPR and all these genetics and tools that we now have, we can begin to return back, so that we enjoy the original taste, but at the same time allow plants to grow and defend themselves, and not push a lot of the pesticides and everything. So we don't want to have plants that are basically dependent on us for everything. So yeah.
Emancipated plants from humans.
I know.
Yeah, I heard, like, I was in the last summer, I went to France, and I heard, like, in the vineyards there, they use hormones to I think to just get rid of like a variety of butterfly that really destroys the grapes. So I never heard that they use hormones for that. purpose. So
Yeah, because we know that also, once so hormones are like almost elicitors, so they kind of, as you spray them, then they start, plant starts to induce all these, activate these different defenses, and then and then they're able also to, those hormones, then the plant will produce, for example, methyl salicylate, that then it's able to attract also the natural enemies, as well as defend itself, really have its defenses like up, like so. Yeah, I mean, I think also the more we also understand chemistry, the phytohormones, then we can actually use it to further help the plants. And we also have other strategies. For example, we know that plant chemistry has been used as, for example, planting a border of plants that produce this chemistry that we so desire, and then they will attract the natural enemies, so you can attract them, and then for any of the caterpillar pests that are within your crop, then they will be attacked by these wasps. So yeah, there's a lot of different good strategies, manipulation strategies that we can use when we know the plant chemistry. We can intercrop too as well. So in Kenya, for example, you can intercrop between maize and, for example, striga is a weed that is intercrop with maize, and so you kind of create these perimeters of plant chemistry that is repelling the insects as well as attracting. So there's a lot of good applications to plant chemistry. I could not show it, but I'm happy to talk again about the applications of plant chemistry in management as well. But then the other side, the issue too, is we also have to be careful, because then at times we are afraid of, if the plant remains in an activated stage, then you can overwhelm, or you can reach to the point of saturation, and so these insects may not be able to key into these volatiles. So it's a very delicate balance as well, but it's an alive field of research.
Well, we're coming to the end, but we sort of had one more comment in the chat. I'm so fascinated by the fact that plants can call other insects for help, or when they're being eaten. Can you say anything a little bit more about the defenses of plants via their roots? I was also very struck by it, just like what a beautiful idea that was.
So yes, so we know that, so once the plants get eaten, now they start to say, they release exudates. So the exudates, and then these are the ones that are inviting these microbes, the beneficial soil microbes, for example. And then we know, then also once the microbes start to interact with plants, then they trigger all these other pathways, as I've explained, the phytohormones, they trigger the plant chemistry, so they regulate these defenses as well. So it's a very neat interaction actually that the plants have with the below ground microbes, and they only activate it when they start to be eaten. They chew the ground, they're like, okay, they release these exudates that now really bring these microbes to the plant, and then they're like, okay, help me. And of course, it's a symbiosis. We know that there's symbiosis, because the plant gives the microbes the carbohydrates, and in return, it's like they activate these different layers of defenses. So that's one way. We know that also there's allelopathy that also happens, and plants can also release other signals that just push away everybody out. So it's also a very, like the soil, and I didn't say, the soil below ground is alive. So many amazing things that are happening. And we also know that then we have these highways of mycorrhizae, fungi, the hyphae, and And so, yes, there's the ground below the ground is much alive as above ground. And of course, we are just beginning to understand all these interactions because, of course, it's dark out there and the soil is such a dense medium to do a lot of just amazing work and collecting the chemistry. But it's happening. We also know that, yeah, the plants, even nematodes, there's a lot of work in the nematode world, and we know that plant chemistry plays a role. So yes, I could have a cup of coffee or tea to talk about this another below ground web of life that's connected via chemistry and other signaling mechanisms.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful. I learned so much. I really appreciate it. And anybody else is here? One more round of applause. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again for organizing this.
Yes, thank you so much for being one of our speakers. And there's a survey link in the chat if you haven't already grabbed it. Take a quick gander at that, and that would be great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.